Hey everyone, it is Michelle from the Strong and Simple podcast, and thanks for tuning in for another mini-sode on this Tuesday or whichever day you were listening in. Thank you so much again. I don't think I can ever say thank you enough for tuning in and listening and sharing with your friends and family members and maybe even strangers out on the interwebs. Really appreciate you being here for our episodes. Today, it's going to be a quickie. It's going to be a shorty. It's going to be a real true mini-sode. And I'm just going to answer a frequently asked question that just came up again in the first live class of Fitness Academy for Beginners. If you don't know, Fitness Academy for Beginners is a 6-week course that Coach Tina Tang and I run together through Straight Up Strong to meet the needs of beginners to strength training. Right now, we are in our spring cohort. Fall cohort starts again. We usually do it in October. So if you are interested, please jump on the wait list. But if you don't want to wait that long to start working out, please reach out to me so we can talk about some different options for me to be able to support you with that. All right. But anyways, what is the frequently asked question? What's the point, Michelle? I'm sure that's what you're asking. And the question is, how do I know when it's time to increase the weight that I am using for an exercise? And I really love this question so much because it's so important. And if you have been listening to Strong and Simple, if you've been following me for a while, you've probably heard me talk about all the different benefits of strength training, of resistance training, right? We're building stability, we're building strength, we are reducing our chance of injury, we are increasing our recovery ability when we do get an injury, right? And not to say that exercise is like, if you work out, you are bulletproof, because that's definitely not true, but you are setting yourself up for a more mobile, strong life as you age, if you are moving your body, and particularly if you are strength training. This question's so good because it means that folks are thinking about, like, being aware that you're going to want to increase your weight for an exercise at some point. But why is this? There's this principle called the principle of progressive overload. This is how our body gets stronger. When you do a particular movement under a particular amount of load, it might be very challenging for you at first, but because our bodies are so flipping cool, your body is going to adapt to that stimulus. That's what we want, right? Right? We are getting stronger. That particular exercise at that weight for that many of repetitions is going to get easier because you're stronger. Yay, right? So let's say you start doing 10 body weight squats, 4 sets of 10 body weight squats. At first, that's really hard for you. When you are done with your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th squat, you're like, whoa, that was hard. Maybe you need a lot of rest in between your sets. Maybe you feel really sore the next day. You're challenging your muscles, but eventually those sets of 8 to 10 body weight squats, you're going to be able to just kind of do them with your eyes closed, not even really trying, not even really paying attention, because your body has adapted to that stimulus. So one of the easiest ways to increase the challenge is to add weight. You can also, if you don't have access to heavier weight, you can also add repetitions, tempo. There's a previous episode on that. Go back and take a listen. Let me know what your questions are about that. But we are eventually going to want to add more weight because at some point, nobody has time for 500 body weight squats, right? We're going to want to add a different stimulus, 5-pound dumbbell, then maybe a 10-pound dumbbell. Then maybe we're changing where we're holding the dumbbell, right? So the rule of thumb is, and there's also an episode where I talked about RPE, or rate of perceived exertion. And when we're thinking about RPE, it's in relation to how many reps we have in reserve. What does that mean? That means very simply that if you're doing 5 reps of an exercise. Let's stick with squats. You're doing 5 squats. If you could have done 3 more squats, then those 5 squats with that particular weight would have been a 7 RPE, because you could have done 3 more. You had 3 reps in reserve. If you could have done 2 more, right, that would have been an RPE 8. So our rule of thumb here is, for whatever rep scheme your programming is calling for, you want to think about your last 1 to 3 reps being really challenging, but with safe form, okay? We don't want to always be going to failure. We don't want to always be like grinding out that last rep. That's not necessarily what we need to be doing, especially all the time, in order to be gaining strength. We do want to be hitting that RPE of 7 to 8 is usually a good point of reference for us. And the more experience you have with strength training, the more experience you have with particular movement patterns, the more in tune you're going to be with your body and when it's time to increase your weight for a particular rep range. And one of the things is also your RPE of 8 with a particular weight and rep scheme could feel very different from day to day, depending on how your sleep is, depending on if you menstruate, where you are in your cycle. It could matter how well you're fueled, how well you're stressed, what else is going on, right? So this is why RPE can also be very subjective, because there's so many different variables that can go into it. So the real simple answer is, you know that you're going to increase your weight, or it's time to increase your weight, when that exercise is too easy for you at that weight. It might take you to, and this is also going to, as a beginner, if you are a beginner, you're going to be increasing your weight more often, more quickly than somebody who's been strength training for a long time, because then otherwise we would have people deadlifting, 1 million pounds if we just kept going and going and going and going. At some point, you do kind of hit a point where you have to get, in order, your strength gains are going to be smaller and maybe take longer to be able to be seen in like an increase in weight. But if you are at that point and you're kind of getting frustrated that you're kind of stuck, look at, is your range of motion improved? Are you doing more reps? Is your form better? Are you moving the weight with more power, right? So there are other ways to explore your progress. So if you are kind of feeling stuck and you're not a beginner, be patient with yourself and play around with some tempo work, play around with range of motion. There are ways to help you kind of get over that hump. But if you're already, deadlifting 400 plus pounds, you can expect that like you're increasing your weight less often and in smaller increments than maybe when you were a beginner. Okay. So when do you increase the weight for an exercise that you are doing? When that exercise is feeling too easy with that weight. If you are prescribed 10 reps and you get to your 10th rep and you're like, wow, I could have kept going and going and going, it's definitely time to increase your weight. And here's the thing, you never really know until you try. And I know that we live in a world where it's really scary to fail or to not accomplish something. It's okay if you try an overhead press with a new weight and it doesn't make it quite over your head, right? Or you're like, all right, so I've been deadlifting at X weight for a little while. I'm going to throw an extra 10 pounds on here, and maybe you don't get the weight off the ground, but maybe you do the next time or the time after that. But you're never going to know until you try, right? So that is today's mini-sode. Hope this was helpful for you. If it was helpful for you, it might be helpful for a friend or family member. Please share this podcast with them if you are so inclined. We always appreciate that. And Marissa and I love answering your questions. So if there is a question about fitness or nutrition, wellness that you really are just like, I'm wondering about this, send it along to us at strongandsimplepodcast@gmail.com so that we can answer it on a future episode. All right, friends, have an amazing day.